This is the Skeptic Squared podcast.
A safe place to make light of sacred things.
My name is Matt.
And I'm Corinne.
And in this program, we will be discussing current events related to religion, atheism, and skepticism. Our goal is not to insult believers,
Although that will probably happen from time to time.
but rather to share our point of view on these topics in a way which will benefit and entertain others.
Or maybe we just want to stroke our own egos. You decide.
Okay, so this is the Skeptic Squared podcast, and with me is my gracious wife, Corinne.
Why are you using that word again?
Mostly because I couldn't think of another one just off the top of my head. I was distracted by other things, like setting up all of this cool equipment that I got for Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And joining us is Corinne's sister, Missi. Welcome, Missi.
Thanks.
How are you doing?
Great.
Great.
It's a little weird, huh, this whole thing?
It is a little bit weird, yeah.
Makes you very self-conscious.
A lot, but it's okay. We're just having a conversation. It's fine.
Yep.
Only having a conversation.
Yep. And mostly what we're going to be talking about is your experience with the Mormon Church.
Easy.
And some of the issues that you've had, or I don't know, just all that kind of stuff. The fun, interesting things.
Okay.
Journey out.
We can do that.
So maybe let's start with that.
Okay.
Where are you religiously now?
I don't consider myself religious at all. It's pretty. I don't know if I'm would consider myself an atheist, but definitely not into religion or believe that there's some supreme being in the sky or anything like that.
So more agnostic, not really sure.
Agnostic. I've heard the term pantheism, which is kind of more like the power of nature.
So the universe is God.
That kind of that makes a lot more sense to me than some supreme being. So yeah.
Okay. Cool.
But you don't believe you can communicate with dolphins, right?
No, it'd be cool, but I'm not there.
We'll leave that to the people in Sedona.
Yeah.
Cool. So you and Corinne are sisters. We've talked about the history, Corinne's experience with Mormonism, and she's talked about a lot of the issues that she's had. So maybe let's talk a little bit about some of the concerns that you've had, or maybe some experiences that you've had in the church that have kind of pushed you out or led you out.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was. Of course, there's always questions when you're younger that never get answered, but, you're always taught, just use your faith, and it kind of is supposed to fill in the gaps.
Do you have any examples of that?
For me, it was always, I felt like, I didn't understand why men always ran the church. I felt like I was more than capable of taking care of myself in a lot of situations, like, just for example, at, girls' camps, I wasn't allowed to build a fire, for some reason.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I wasn't... The men would build a fire, and I couldn't understand that.
That's
because
weird.
Yeah.
I've honestly never heard that. I thought that was one of the things that the girls did at girls' camp, because it's
we
camp.
were never taught how to build a fire.
Our dad taught us how to build a fire.
Yeah.
And I would go on, I would go on these camping trips with an Air Force auxiliary group that I was with, and I was expected to, hike mountains and build fires and sleep alone by myself night after night when I was 13 years old, and here I am 16 years old and not allowed to build a fire. I couldn't understand that. So I didn't understand why this organization was saying you have a place, and while other organizations,
the Air Force organization.
Yeah, the Air Force organization was like, you can do whatever you want to do, you just have to be capable of it.
Right.
So,
and then the church was saying that you couldn't.
Yeah, you couldn't.
Even if you could
you are capable of it, but it's not
to.
your place. Yeah. So it didn't ever make sense to me.
That.
Yes. we have other people for that. So that was always really, really frustrating for me.
Okay.
That was one of the biggest questions that was never answered, but I always just kind of had to get over it. Yeah, just accept it and move on. And then for me, it was mostly when I got into college, I realized, oh my gosh, the next step is supposed to be marriage, which was not something I wanted to do at all. It was never something that interested me. I was never never felt attracted enough to guys that I would want to spend the rest of my life with one. So for me, that was like huge. I knew that I didn't want to get married.
Yeah.
And
that's like a huge
yeah,
part of the
that was the
church.
huge part. I was 18. I moved out.
Goal.
I
Yeah.
now was a part of a young single adult ward, and every single activity, every single sacrament meeting, every single church event was catered towards getting me
and getting married.
a husband. Yeah, which I didn't want. Exactly. I mean, and
So did you still go to those activities? Or?
No, I finally stopped. I couldn't stand it anymore. Why would I go to something that I
Right.
knew I didn't want to do? So that slowly led me away from the church, and then I got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm about to commission into the Air Force. I'm about to go off and serve my country, and I know that if I go into the Air Force, maybe like either unmarried or not having served in a mission, without having like a really firm testimony, there's no way that I'm going to stay in the church. There's just no way.
Right.
There's too much of a culture of, I don't know, I guess the Mormons would term it like the worldly culture of like drinking, and it's huge. It's social, normal things are very popular in the Air Force.
Mormons and some fundamentalists and other groups look down on.
Exactly.
But most people do these things.
Exactly.
They're just normal things for most people.
Social
And they're still
norms.
good people.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
And they're still good
yeah.
people.
So, and I'd seen that. I'd seen that these people that did these things that I had been taught were things that bad people do. They were some of the best people I ever met. That made me feel extremely comfortable, and really I looked up to and respected in so many ways. So, basically, I realized, all right, what do you want to do? Okay, marriage, absolutely not. You can't do that. Maybe I can go on a mission before I commission. We'll look at doing that. And so
I didn't know that. How into looking into doing a mission did you get?
I had been talking to Dad about it for a while, and I had talked to my detachment commander about it, and is this something that I could do? And I knew how to take the steps to it. So the only issue that I had was finding money and actually, going.
So as a teenager, you were a part of an Air Force group, like a youth group or something, like an academy.
It's called Civil Air Patrol. It's just an auxiliary
and
Air
then
Force.
before you would join the actual Air Force as an adult, you were looking into going on a mission for the church.
No, it was
Or-
so
you
in
were already
college
able.
I was in ROTC, which
Okay.
is, and so I had technically enlisted in the Air Force in order to do ROTC, and that's like their officer training program. So in college I was enlisted in the Air Force doing ROTC. Before college I'd been doing an auxiliary thing, and so it was while I was in college.
So you would have had to put ROTC on
Yes.
hold
Yeah.
to go on a mission.
Yeah, I would have had to put everything on hold, which is why I talked to my commander about it.
That
and
sounds
we
like that would complicate it
figured
way
it
more.
out. Oh yeah, it was. It was extremely
Is
complicated.
it something that they deal with a lot though here in Utah? Even
No, not because most guys go on their mission between their freshman and sophomore year, so it's not that big of a deal to take a 2-year break from ROTC at that point. And I was at a point where it would have been between my junior and senior year, because I had to be older to go on my mission, that it would have been a huge deal. But I decided to really seriously consider it, and so I started doing a lot of studying about the church on my own, and a lot of research and studying, and things. I just realized that so many questions that I had always have just kept on resurfacing, and I wasn't getting any answers, and I just got more and more frustrated. And around this time, I had met a girl that I just completely fell for 100%. I realized the church was not making me happy. Nothing that people were telling me to do that was supposed to be making happy was actually making me happy.
You didn't fit the mold.
I didn't, yeah. Well, and even outside of that, I kind of did fit the mold, to be honest. I was definitely a more stereotypical Mormon. I was to the point, I was to the point where I was going to church every week again. I was studying my scriptures and praying. I was doing everything, that I need to do, and I felt like I was a very, very faithful Mormon. And all my ROTC friends especially knew that I was a very faithful Mormon. It was just the fact that I was not getting I did not feel accomplished in my life. I didn't feel any of the joy that everyone told me that I was supposed to be feeling. I felt none of that. While I spend time with this girl, I spend time with people not of the Mormon faith, and I feel very happy, and I feel very comfortable. And I just started to realize that, this whole eternal happiness thing, kind of seemed a lot more made up. I didn't
Yeah.
understand why I had to sacrifice happiness in the short term to have this happiness in the long run.
Why can't you
that
have
I
both?
didn't. Yeah, why can't I have both?
Which is
exactly.
what they advertise. They say
Exactly.
that you can have that kind of happiness now with your family here, and then in eternities it just prolongs.
Exactly. I that's exactly what it was for
Mm.
me. I didn't understand why I was having to give up so much for this eternity thing when even the LDS teachings were saying that no matter what, I was going to be happy in eternity. And
Right.
I knew that I was not happy doing everything that they had told me that I needed to do.
So when you were going through this and you were feeling like the Mormon narrative and all of the things that you were supposed to do that you were trying to do,
Yeah.
and that wasn't giving you the the kind of reward that they were saying that you were going to get. How did you process that? Like, did you think that it was your fault? Did you think that the process was broken?
Well, for me, it was that had been going on for years and years.
Oh.
I had felt like it was my fault that I didn't want to get married, that I didn't want to spend time with these guys, that I was not attracted to men at all. I definitely felt like that was my fault building up throughout the years, but maybe even at that point while I was really studying and trying to go on my mission, maybe I did a little bit feel like it was my fault. Because it definitely wasn't easy leaving the Mormon Church, and even after I had kind of made that split, I kind of freaked out about it for a long time. So I think it took me a long time to probably realize that I gave it everything that I could. I got everything that I could from it, and it was time to move on.
It just wasn't giving you the
Exactly.
kind of stuff that you were looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fulfillment.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay, so you've mentioned that you weren't attracted to the guys that you were supposed to be attracted to, and you found this girl that you liked, and in the Mormon Church, you open up any newspaper these days, there's some issue with the Mormon Church and gay rights or gay marriage or homosexuals in general. So what was that like? Like growing up with that, in the back of your mind that you might have these feelings or whatever. Like, did you suppress it? Were you aware of it?
That's exactly. It was only a suppression. Like I know I can distinctly tell you the moment when I realized when I was 11 years old, like, okay, this is an issue, Missy. Like, you definitely are attracted to women. You need to figure this out. And for me, it was, the Mormon Church kind of says that it doesn't really exist. I mean,
for a long time, that's true.
For a long time, they kind of and growing up at that time, that's what they said was that it's a choice. It's if you just kind of focus your mind on something else. Yeah. And I never felt like it was necessarily a type of perversion. I just felt like it was just a little aspect of my personality. Like, oh, okay, so I'm a little bit more attracted to girls, but I will become attracted to.
You'll grow into.
I will grow into it. Yes.
Yeah.
And so that was something that I just kind of always expected would happen. Is that it would. One day I would find the right guy. Yeah, there would be the one guy that maybe I would fall for.
That just never happened.
But yeah, it never happened, and I didn't really want it to happen. After I that's not necessarily something that I wanted. It's something that other people wanted for me.
Right. That's an interesting point. There's another podcast that Corinne and I like to listen to. Thank God I'm Atheist, which is one of the best titles ever.
Yeah.
But one of the hosts is a gay man. And they have these conversations, him and the other co-host, about homosexuality and Mormons and all that kind of stuff. And the question comes up: if you could choose, why would you choose to be a homosexual? Why would you want to be part of that marginalized group and all that kind of stuff? And Frank is the name of the host. He said, I'm at a point in my life, like I'm 40 years old. I've been gay my whole life. And I'm at a place where I wouldn't want to be anything other than what I am. I wouldn't want to be straight, And all of the reasons that people point to, I shouldn't say all the reasons. Most of the reasons that I've heard that people point to for why they would want to be straight are exactly like you said. There are things imposed upon them by other people saying that they should be this way and they're not this way. Or, if they are this way, then these are the consequences for that behavior. You won't get into heaven. You won't get a family.
Exactly.
Those sorts of things. So it's all external. It's never from the person.
Exactly. Yeah. It was not an internal thing. It was definitely other people.
Yeah. And I don't know. To me, that just seems like it would be extremely frustrating, growing up in that kind of environment where you're constantly being told that this innate aspect of who you are is wrong in some way, or that you can't ever act on that in any way. you know.
It's extremely frustrating. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, and what really drove me away, what finally was actually the moment where I realized that the church did not have the correct, this was still when I definitely believed that the church was true, but when I realized that there was no way that the church had this doctrine correct was when I was actively searching for an answer to, like, is it okay to be gay in the Mormon Church? I was really, really actively searching for that because I realized there's no way that I could be, straight in the Mormon Church. So
Right.
I was
So how
searching
can
for
you
that.
reconcile the two?
How can I reconcile that? And so I did a lot of research and I read a lot of uh, general conference talks. Oh my gosh. I read a lot of general conference talks, and I remember actually it was a church publicity release from, I don't know, it just probably 2011, 2012, that said, we acknowledge that same-sex attraction is a thing. We are completely accepting of those who have same-sex attraction in the LDS Church. However, they are not allowed to act on that. And the instant that they said that, I just could not believe that they had been telling me my entire life, you will not be happy unless you get married and have a family. And now all of a sudden they're saying, it's okay that you have same-sex attraction, but you are not going to be able to have all these joys and blessings that you've been promised your whole life.
Right.
You're not going to have that now.
Right.
And that was the moment that I realized the church, didn't have their shit together at all. Like, absolutely did not. And it was time to just get out, because that was not an organization that I wanted to be a part of at all. So.
Yeah. So, okay, so you mentioned that you did a lot of studying, a lot of reading. You mentioned the general conference stuff.
Yeah.
Were there other resources that you went to? Or did you ever go to, like, local leaders?
I never went to local leaders. I never went to... because all the local leaders had known me since I was a little girl. And had been, just kind of expecting me my whole life to end up with a guy. I was never... It never even crossed my mind to go to local...
Still bishop?
I think...
Or was he not bishop anymore?
He might have
I
been.
think he was still bishop.
Probably
He was
was.
bishop almost through my entire college.
Yeah.
And we were there about the same time.
Yeah.
So,
So he probably was. If not, he was in the high priest. One and the same, basically.
High council.
High council. Anyway. And so, I'm sorry, to go back to your original question, my other resources.
In, like, a local leader or bishop?
I never confided in anyone about what I was going through. I went to some other resources online. I tried to get in touch with some other Mormons who had claimed they were gay. I never ended up having long sustained conversations with them, but I went to this site called Affirmation. I don't know if you guys have heard of that.
Not familiar with that.
I think that I told you about it. But that's
came up in that book too.
It probably well, actually, it's not a it's a site for gay and lesbian Mormons, but they tell you right off the bat you might not want to be Mormon and gay is something that they say. They're like this. They basically
it's not
try
for
to
everyone.
they try to pool all the information about Mormons and gays into one website, and it's not that stupid Mormons and gays website that the Mormon Church has. That actually doesn't refer to it as being gay. They refer to it as same-sex attraction.
Right.
Let's make that very clear.
And I noticed, well, I guess it's been a couple of years since I've really looked through their catalog, but the last time I looked, almost every single example that they have on there is somebody in their late 20s, maybe early 30s, who is in, this marriage, and they're going through all of these motions and things. They never have an example of somebody who was like, 50, 60 years old, who had been doing this with, kids that are now adults or anything like that, like that talk about the life term, the lifelong effects of that kind of relationship. It's always somebody who's been in this for like, maybe 3 or 4 years, that kind of thing. It's like, well, you can fake a lot of things for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. That's a good point. And we read a book about someone in our ward who actually
let's
is
talk
married.
about that book. Do you know the title of it?
What was it? A Place in the Kingdom.
Yeah.
It's called A Place in the Kingdom. And I actually ended up not finishing it, but Corinne did, and she gave me all the notes about
and wasn't the authors somehow connected to your ward?
Right. So the people that compiled the whole book and asked for these stories are in our parents' ward. And his story is in there. It's like the first one, and then she writes her side of it too. And the rest are just people that he's interacting with.
So he's in one of these types of mixed orientation marriages. Then. So he's a gay man in a straight marriage, and he's a Mormon. Interesting.
Yep.
So.
It is. It's really interesting to read this story because we've known him for our entire time living in Utah, and didn't know this about him until we read this book.
No, I mean, he was always a little effeminate.
Yeah.
But, you know, a lot of Mormon guys just are. That's just kind of the culture. And so, yeah, and I never thought, oh man, he's got to be gay. I have thought about that. I have thought that about one other person in our ward, but yeah, I never thought about it.
Yeah.
So what kinds of stories were in this book?
Well, a lot of them revolved around not having like enough time with their dads growing up, spending too much time with their moms. A lot of them were involved in Evergreen or other like Mormon associated therapy groups.
And what is Evergreen?
So
I don't think we've mentioned that yet.
I think you'd explain Evergreen better.
So Evergreen right now, if you were to look up what Evergreen is, it's basically this conference that is held at BYU where they talk about same-sex attraction, and they couple that also with porn addiction. So it's basically a lot of like self-shaming and like cycle of guilt type stuff. People coming in with all of these things that they think are these problems that they're told are problems from the church, and they come to these conferences to talk or listen to seminars about how they can control it or curb it or you know that kind of thing. But if you go back a few decades, like in the 70s, I think is like when the really bad stuff happened. It was somehow affiliated with BYU's like social science department or something along those lines, and they were conducting these experiments to try to turn gay men into straight men, including things like shock therapy while watching porn, gay porn, that kind of thing. So they would show them images of naked men and shocked them in the genitals to associate pain with those kinds of images. Okay, and then so like there's tons of stories. Like if you just look it up on YouTube, you can find testimonials of men who have gone through these experiences, and I think they talk about it. In that one movie, the documentary 8, the Mormon Proposition.
They have one guy in there.
Yeah, that talks about the Prop 8 in California and all that. So, truly horrific things, outdated science, bad science. It was all about manipulating psychology and that kind of stuff. And a lot of the things that they were basing that on are exactly the things that you mentioned in that book about, not spending enough time with their father, spending too much time with their mother, which was... for a long time, that's what a lot of the social scientists and psychologists thought was the cause of that. Which, I mean, we've come to a place with the research where we now know that that's not the case. Right. That there are environmental and genetic factors, that kind of stuff. So these days you'd be hard pressed to find a place like that, but they do still exist. For instance, Michelle Bachmann, who the politician, she ran for president. Was it 2008 or whatever? Her and the other one, Sarah Palin. Anyway, so Michelle Bachmann, her husband, is one of these therapists that does this. And I'm 90% sure that he is himself a gay man.
Yeah, that's me. Oh my God.
Yeah, so it's all based on debunked science, and it sounds like that's what they're promoting in this book, right?
Right. Yeah. So the thing about this book, though, too, is that it was written in the 90s. Like, it was compiled in the 90s, so this is before any of that actually came out in the church. I don't know if this would be their stance these days, like the guy that compiled it, but yeah. So a lot of the stories had the same elements in it. It was not spending enough time with their fathers, not being masculine enough, spending too much time with mothers. One or two of them were sexually abused.
I feel like
when
a
they were
lot
younger.
of them.
I don't remember like two specific ones.
Really?
Yeah.
But that's another thing that people
but that is another
point
thing,
to. Sexual abuse. They say that because somebody was sexually abused by somebody of the same gender, that like predisposes them to that kind of sexual encounter.
Right.
They often say, I don't know if this is still supported by psychologists today, but there's the old adage that your first sexual encounter is the determining factor for your future sexual encounters. So your very first sexual encounter is what you will essentially be attracted to for the rest of your life. And so they base that off of this idea that sexual abuse influences things like sexual orientation and fetishes and all that kind of stuff. It's really, I don't know, it's complicated, and I don't know how much of it is actually supported by any research anymore, but I don't know. I haven't kept up on that aspect,
Mm-hmm.
which is, it's
Yeah.
weird stuff.
So there were also a couple stories in there of older couples.
Were there?
Yeah, some of them. One of them had like 8 kids or something. They were in their late 50s, 60s, or whatever. And the last of their kids had finally moved out, and that was when he like finally came out to his wife. And so this was like while he was still processing through that, I believe.
The stories that I read, where they had been in like a long-term heterosexual relationship, especially in the first one, is that he always said like, oh, but I do slip up. You know, he said that he says that multiple times. Like they make mistakes. It's not like you can.
Yeah, it's not something you can turn
suppress.
Even when you're in the straight relationship.
And there's no reason why you would expect that.
Yeah,
Like
but
but that's the thing they do.
It is expected.
This is.
There's no reason why a reasonable person.
That was when they were saying you could pray away the gay.
Yeah.
And so it was legitimately something that he thought he shouldn't be experiencing anymore, and that's I think that's the main reason why he says he still slips up, because he's not worthy.
Well, I mean, when so a couple weeks ago, last month, early November, when the LDS Church changed their policy on homosexuals in cohabitating relationships, gay marriage, and then the policy that would affect their children, that whole fiasco that we did a couple episodes on, really. There was an article that was circulating around Facebook where they talked about a man, I forget his name. Do you remember the name? Do you remember the article that I'm referring to? Okay, so let's see. So the article was pointed to by a friend of one of my siblings on her Facebook page. The article was written, it was basically excerpts from a gay man who killed himself on the steps of a Mormon stake center in the 90s.
Oh, I know that story, yeah.
They talk about that in 8 as well.
Yeah, I can't remember the name.
I can't remember the name.
Anyway, it's not Matthew Shepard. That's another example. Similar situation, but it wasn't him. It was another man. Anyway, they talk in a lot of these excerpts. He talks about how he was under the impression and was taught in the church that he could pray away the gay. He could, read enough scriptures and fast and pray and do all these things, and that would make his sexual orientation either change or kind of diminish a little bit.
At least be able to suppress it better.
Right, and it never happened for him. And because it never happened for him, he became just full of self-loathing and depressed, and he couldn't process it, he couldn't handle it, and he still believed in the church, and so he took his own life. And that's a major problem with the Mormon gay community, because they can't reconcile the two. Most people can't. I'm told that there are people that can. I've never heard a reasonable explanation of how they do it, other than just through sheer suppression.
Right.
But I mean, I wouldn't call that healthy.
No,
it's not healthy. And I mean,
and it's just sad because they're not ever going to get those rewards that they've been promised. Like they are literally wasting their life.
And that's how they feel.
Yeah.
And that's why so many of them are drawn to suicide. If they can't get out of the church, suicide is one of the options that they see. And it's incredibly sad, and it's a huge problem, and it's something that the church, I don't think, has policies in place to fully deal with that kind of stuff. And it's only going to get worse with these new policies, because it's going to, like we've mentioned before, this new policy is pushing out the more progressive types, the liberal types, the people that are seeking some kind of reconciliation, trying to, build bridges. Mormons building bridges, that group up in Salt Lake that are trying to build bridges between the Mormon community and the gay community. This policy shows that the Mormon Church is not a welcome place or a safe place for homosexuals, and that is going to push out more and more people, and it's going to make it harder for the people that stay. And the next generation of gay kids growing up in it are going to have an even harder time.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So.
And it's so weird that they, for some reason, they feel so threatened by the gay community. I mean, they don't have the same treatment for people who are alcoholics, or I mean, even horrendous crimes that people commit. It's not held to the same level as being a gay or a lesbian. It's insane. I mean, I think that if you're like a committed Mormon, you would feel like you could be forgiven quicker for like murdering someone than for fornicating with someone of the same sex. I mean, I definitely had that thought cross my mind multiple times.
Well, there was an interesting point made on, again, another podcast. I can't remember which one it was, where they were talking about this, and they made the point that it's actually the church's policy against people in a gay marriage is actually more strict than their policy against a gay person who is just sleeping around. Like they actually have because if you get into a gay marriage, you are mandated to go through a disciplinary council, and the most likely outcome is excommunication. You'll be kicked out of the church. If you are just sleeping around, if you're just a gay person sleeping with different people every night, you'll still probably have disciplinary council, probably, but it's not mandatory. So there's still a chance that local leadership will try to work with you, try to keep you in the fold, and all that kind of stuff. But with this new policy, they cannot, turn a blind eye to gay marriage.
It's mind-boggling.
I know. It's kind of weird to think about.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the stories that I read, though, like even the ones that just slept around, they still went through a disciplinary council, and they were almost always disfellowshipped.
Right. Right, and that is what's going to happen for the most part. Even before they made this policy, that was the case. But that wasn't always the case, and it wasn't mandated. It wasn't,
It's not a for sure thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there were examples in more liberal areas of California or the East Coast where there were some stories that I heard where a bishop knew that somebody or a couple was in a gay marriage or were living together or that kind of thing, like in an actual relationship, and they knew that this was happening, but because the couple hadn't come to them in a confession and admitted to it, and they were still coming to church, they were still paying tithing, they're still trying to participate, they kind of let it slide. They didn't want to put them through a disciplinary council. They wanted them to be participants in their congregation. But now that's not an option to them. They took that away. So again, this is all just pushing out more progressive liberal types.
Right.
So makes me worried for the coming generations. Anyway, so going back, you talked a little bit about some of your questions, some of your doubts. We've talked a lot about the whole homosexual thing and all, that factor is obviously huge.
Yeah.
Were there any other issues that you've had or questions that you had?
Well, I mean, I guess that so much in my research for trying to, after I realized, I cannot be happy in the church. I need to pull out, so to speak. I started to realize that you can't just cut that part of your life out easily. It's not an easy thing to do.
Cutting out Mormonism?
Cutting out Mormonism. Yeah. No, it's not. And I know that it's a big reason why you guys do things like this podcast, because it's really, really difficult to reconcile with yourself that you just gave up a huge part of your life. Like, basically 22 years of my life I was saying was untrue, and it's really tough because it's something that you firmly believe. So I actually turned to one of my friends who I thought was just struggling in the church, and I just kind of confided in him, like, I don't want to be Mormon anymore. I've left the church, and I just don't know what to do now. And he actually said that he had completely left the Mormon Church. He had tried to become what's it called again? He tried to get his records removed from. Yeah, he had completely resigned. He tried to resign from the church and all that. He was going through that process. Okay. It was like a for sure thing for him. And so I asked him, like, how did you do it? And he pointed me to a lot of resources online. He recommended a few books to me that even. Like books that he found at like Deseret Book about Joseph Smith. The one that I remember him mentioning was Joseph Smith, Rough Stone Rolling.
Oh yeah,
which is interesting.
Was it Richard Bushman?
Yeah, who I think ended up being excommunicated from the church for this book that he wrote. Yeah. Even though it is a factual totally book, completely historically accurate, and the church was trying to suppress this book.
If I remember correctly, in the last couple of years. The LDS Church on their website, LDS.org, has been putting up these essays kind of explaining a lot of these historical issues, polygamy, blacks in the priesthood, all that kind of stuff. And I remember looking at some of the references at the bottom of the page, and I'm pretty sure I remember seeing Rough Stone Rolling as one of the
Wouldn't surprise me.
references.
Yeah, I mean, this guy was a well-known church scholar.
Yeah.
He had written so many historical church essays and books. He was a really, really well-respected guy, which is obviously why his book was at Deseret Book.
Right.
And that's actually the book that my friend picked up. And after he read it, he was like, I cannot be a member of this church anymore. That was the book that sent him on his way. So he recommended that book to me. I just read some excerpts from it, but it was things like that. I had to go back to the roots of the church and the historical basis of the church to try to like reconcile with myself why there were all of these questions in my mind, and I had to realize that the church was not perfect, that I had made it perfect in my head, but the LDS church was not perfect, and I had to go back to the very roots of this organization and really educate myself about the history of the LDS church, which is more than I can say any Mormons that I know bother to do. They just are completely satisfied with what they're taught in Sunday school, and that's it. That's all they want to know. Yeah, they're like, oh, that makes sense, and it does. It makes perfect sense.
Everything starts to crumble.
Yeah,
that's why.
And you know, the LDS church is very much. Only read the books that we suggest because everyone else is out to get the LDS church, and they're gonna put these thoughts in your head that are gonna make you want to leave this church. You know, and that it's mind-boggling. Yeah, it's mind-boggling to me because in any other field, in any other educational field or scholarly field, you never only look at one side of an issue. That's absurd to think that you only would examine and take sources from one side of an issue. And yet Mormons buy into it all the time. Educated Mormons buy into it all the time. They're convinced that people are out to get them.
Yeah, and despite that, you know, in the wake of that kind of mentality that they perpetuate, that they support as a church, you get organizations like fairmormon.org or the Neil A. Maxwell Institute, Farms, like, you know, these apologetic groups that try to find answers for a lot of these issues, especially the historical issues, and try to come up with, you know, reasonable explanations for why things went down the way that they did. Why would Joseph Smith marry a 14-year-old girl? Or why would Joseph Smith send a man on the other side of the world and then marry his wife while he's gone? You know, why would that happen? Or why would, you know, the Book of Mormon be said to be the most perfect and correct book and have, you know, the history of an entire people on North America, ancient North America, and not be able to find a single shred of archaeological evidence to support it? And so a lot of people turn to those organizations for answers to explain all this stuff because that's how they set it up, and it's supported by the church. They encourage that kind of thing, and a lot of people end up actually leaving the church because of the answers that they find on these websites, because they're either completely insane or inadequate.
It's, you know, basically you just got to pray about it is what most of their answers are. You know, just find faith. Doubt your doubts before you doubt your faith.
Right.
Like, okay, but there needs to come a point where I need to doubt my faith, or else I would have. I mean, that's probably one of the silliest phrases that I know I have been told multiple times is by our family is doubt your doubts before. That's one of the first things that our mom told us. Told me was you need to doubt your doubts before you doubt your faith. And in my head, I'm like, I have been doubting my doubts for years. I have doubt. Trust me, I have checked the doubting my doubts box. That box has been checked. Now I'm doubting my faith, and I'm feeling great about it.
And that's the sad thing about the fact that, you know, that phrase came out in General Conference. Like last year, the year before, whatever it was.
It was 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
It was Uchtdorf. It was a
and so a lot of members, the true believing members that have never gone through a crisis of faith, never really had doubts or looked into the historical issues, like to them, when somebody says that they have problems with the church's history, and then they hear this phrase, doubt your doubts, they think that that's a perfectly reasonable thing, that that's all you need to do. Like, why haven't you done this yet? Why haven't you just doubted your doubts? It's like, they don't realize that for most people that go through a crisis of faith, that's the first thing they do.
Right.
They find something that runs contrary to their worldview, and they start to do research. They try to find a reasonable way to reconcile the issue, their faith with whatever it is. For me, it was my faith with science. Trying to reconcile what I was taught with like the creation story versus evolution and the Big Bang, trying to reconcile those things, like that just sent me down this huge rabbit hole. And, people assume that because you you can't reconcile the two. That you're either thinking about it too much. That was something that my mom told me.
Yeah,
Like you're overthinking it.
I've heard that. I've heard that before. Yeah.
It's like, so what amount of thinking about something is the right amount of thinking about it? The amount that leads me to your conclusion.
Obviously.
You know, but yeah, they assume that this is just an easy thing that you don't necessarily, you know, doubt your doubts initially anyway. But when that's exactly what happens to most people the first time they come across something that, you know, is contrary to their belief system.
Yeah.
So let's go to you mentioned prayer. You know, you have to pray about it.
Right.
Did you ever try praying? What was your experience with praying? Did you ever get an answer?
All the time. I mean, did I ever get an answer? I mean, I definitely always tried to pray. That I never necessarily, you know, thought, oh, you know, prayed away the gay, but I always prayed that, like, you know, Heavenly Father, please help me meet the guy that I'm supposed to end up with. Like, please, I'm telling you, if you do not send this guy to me before I commission, I promise you, I am not strong enough. I will not be able to handle the, you know, what temptations of the world without someone at my side here. Like, I'm giving you a timeline. Like, you've got to send someone to me. And I'm not even lying.
Mistake.
Yeah,
obviously.
you put a condition on it.
But you know, I was just honestly in my mind, I was just trying to be honest with you know, my Heavenly Father, that like this is my weakness. You can either like, you got to help me out here, you know. And so what's interesting is that I've always kind of wondered about this, because about the same time that I was saying, like, Heavenly Father, please send me someone to fall in love with. Like, just send me that guy that you want me to be with. That has been promised to me. You know, I want to be faithful. Just help me out here. And around that same time, I guess that I must have, like, kind of opened my mind to falling in love is actually when this girl came into my life that I had absolutely fallen in love with. I was like, well, that's funny. That, you know, and I kind of realized that looking back. So, yes, in that regard, I did get an answer to my prayers. I absolutely did, you know, get that person that I was wanting to fall in love with. But you know, no, I never necessarily received
and
an
you know
answer
exactly
from
what the
my prayers.
Mormon response to that would be. Satan heard your prayer.
Yeah, Satan. Obviously, I was praying too loud or something. But prayer was always something that kind of just. I don't think that I could never say I received an answer through prayer. Prayer was always something that calmed me. And even to this day, even though I'm not a believer in an almighty being, I still, when I'm stressed out, I will find myself kind of praying, because I feel like it's more like a meditation for me now. I kind of do the same thing that I used to do when I was a kid, kind of pray.
Thoughts.
Yeah, it absolutely helps me collect my thoughts, and I'm like, all right, I'm calm now. So that same feeling that I have now when I pray, that was the same feeling that I would get throughout the years of kind of praying for an answer and looking for a solution to the crisis that I was in. Yeah. So that's as far as the answers went.
Yeah. Cool. So did you have like, well, I mean, we've talked about Moroni's promise, where in the Book of Mormon it says that, you know, you ask God if the Book of Mormon is true, then He will give you the burning in the bosom, so that you know that God wants you to, you know, believe this thing and all that kind of stuff. Did you ever try anything like that? Or?
Yeah, I was a huge fan of the Book of Mormon. Yeah. I loved it so much. I read the Book of Mormon at least 3 or 4 times in middle school, and then when I got into high school. It was pretty much the only book that I brought to school with me was the Book of Mormon. I would read it all the time. And then when I got into high school and with seminary and such, I started to read other books. But I always loved reading the Book of Mormon. And I can't ever say that I got that burning of the bosom, but I mean, in my head, it was a book that I loved. I loved reading all the stories about it. Yeah. I loved all the stories that were in the Book of Mormon. So,
do you still find like value or like morals or anything?
No, actually, now the more I think about it, the more I realize that there kind of some messed up morals in there. Yeah. When you think about it, like Nephi killing a drunk man because Laban. He was afraid. Yeah, killing Laban when or Laban. Wait, what? Laban. Yeah, sorry, Laban when he's drunk and God wanted him to do this?
Yeah, the Spirit of God tells him it's better that one man should perish than that an entire nation should dwindle in unbelief.
I know, like you were really that scared that...
Even though they ended up dwindling in unbelief anyway.
Exactly, right. Yeah, so I mean, that I had a really difficult time with, and Yeah, there some other stories. Like, people get thrown into fires all the time for being believers, you know? It's it's horrible.
Alma
Yeah, and they don't do anything about it. Like, why don't we call down on the power of God? Oh, but they're going up to God now, so it's okay.
Like, they rationalized it.
Are you kidding me?
It was the same reasoning that you had, was it 2 years ago with Sandy Hook at the mass shooting with the little kids?
Like, he is sending them.
They all went to heaven. Like, God needed more angels.
Yep.
Exactly.
Like, how messed up is that rationale?
Yeah, and it's so weird because they only use that rationale when it suits their purposes, when it fits them, and it is so frustrating. You know, have some standardization here. You can't just pick and choose.
Consistency.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's actually a great shifting of gears for the other thing that I wanted to talk about. We had an interesting weekend last weekend. Where one of your family members passed away, and you know, we went to the funeral and memorial service, and we had a lot of interesting interactions with your family members. And one of the things that I heard was that, well, your grandpa, for instance, it was your grandma that died. She had Alzheimer's for several years, and he was relieved that she had finally passed away.
Family.
And it's interesting that you bring up this example of, like, you know, the Book of Mormon, where the believers were being killed and they went up to be angels in heaven, and then Sandy Hook, where they again went up to be angels in heaven. Why wasn't there a provision where we could do the same thing for your grandma?
Right.
Death with dignity.
Exactly.
I
have no
why would she have to suffer Alzheimer's and a degenerative brain for 17 years? Like, why wasn't there some form of mercy?
Exactly. That's a really good point. I don't understand. And when you say that, like, oh, but they get to go up to heaven and be angels with God. Like, why aren't we all there now?
Right.
Why? How can you?
If heaven is so
why
awesome.
is suicide such a bad thing?
Yeah, exactly. Why is suicide such a bad thing? Like, I think I'm done now. I'm ready to go meet my maker. It's mind-boggling to me. It's like a buffet, you know. They just pick and choose what they want.
Well, that's an interesting thing in the Bible. I forget exactly where it is, but you have this phenomenon where like, early Christians were reading these scriptures about how awesome heaven was going to be, how they were going to live with Jesus forever and join the choirs of angels and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of people apparently were looking at suicide as an option to go join the angels. And so you get these little little mini condemnations about suicide, saying, like, if you do it, you'll go to hell. So don't do it. But if you stick it out, then you'll go to heaven. Like, so just stay around,
so just suffer,
and then you can go be in heaven or whatever. So
it's mind-boggling.
So but suicide isn't exactly what I wanted to talk about. Obviously, death with dignity and euthanasia under certain circumstances is something that we could have a whole episode on that, and like the ethics of that. Like, I personally have mixed feelings about suicide, because I work at a treatment center where most of the kids that I work with, or a lot of the kids at least, go through phases where they want to kill themselves.
Right.
And being minors, obviously we have to stop them. And most of them want to kill themselves because of, like, PTSD, they were abused, depression, that kind of stuff. But that's completely different than, say, somebody like your grandma, or another person that, like, maybe has, like, terminal illness, where they know that they have, like, a set amount of months or years left, and as they get closer to it and the pain starts to become unbearable, like, they just want to end it. Like, I had a friend in college who had a brain tumor. He found out he had a brain tumor about a year or so after he graduated, and, like, his life just went to crap, like, obviously.
Right.
Like, as you can imagine, a brain tumor will do that to you. And I remember talking to another one of my friends after he had died, that, like, in the last couple weeks leading up to his death, all he wanted to do was just die. Like, that, he just wanted to get it over with. He was in so much pain that he couldn't bear it. But he also didn't have the option of suicide, because that's frowned upon in Mormonism. So Anyway, but so
And I can't understand why even people who are severely depressed, I can't understand how you as a believer in this loving God believe that someone who has severe depression, which let's face it, that's an actual medical condition, severe depression, that God would not allow them to come home to him. Like this loving God, oh no, I'm sorry. I gave you I'm sorry, I gave you depression and I just want you to live on this earth and suffer. Like no. That's mind-boggling to me that people look on as suicide as so evil. That this loving God would not immediately forgive this person. Yeah. Like I know everything you're going through, and it goes the same with this with euthanasia, putting someone through that much pain, and not only that human being, but their family through so much pain. It boggles my mind that people think that counts as being evil,
Right.
Like, oh no, there's still part of your journey left here. There's still something you can learn.
Like, and if it's not you that's learning the lesson, it's your family that's learning the lesson.
Yeah,
or
at your expense.
Like yeah.
It's
and then you're just a pawn.
Not okay.
so let's talk a little bit about the funeral, your grandmother's death, interactions with family. I mean, for Corinne, this was her first experience with death after leaving the church, and so. Did you want to maybe mention like your feelings on like the experience or?
So let's see. I was relieved, like everyone else in my family, that she finally died. Sounds terrible, but it had to happen. My biggest worry was the actual like funeral, not the fact that she was dead. It was being in a Mormon setting in a Mormon church. Having to go through the motions of like almost being a Mormon, like just being surrounded by that
having to play by their rules.
Yeah, that was what I was stressing out about.
Yeah,
especially when Mom asked me to sing 2 songs that I just didn't want to sing.
Yeah. And what were those songs?
What was that first one called? Heavenly Father.
Yeah, I know Heavenly Father loves me.
Yeah,
I know.
And then the other one was Families Can Be Together Forever, which is. That one was probably the worst one for me. I almost didn't even sing that song. Yeah,
and this was all of the grandkids got up on the podium and sang the song together.
Yeah, I was saying the first verse of both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and initially when she asked me, I was like, I'm not sure that I want to do that. I need some time to think about it. And I could just see immediately in her face, she's like, how sad she was with that response.
That you would have to think about it?
Yeah, that I would have to think about it. She's like, okay, but I really hope you will. It's like putting you through that guilt trip without her realizing that that's what she's doing.
Yeah. She, in her mind, she's probably thinking that she's encouraging you to do a good thing, like the right thing.
Right.
Yeah, like
and
this
in
is something.
Way, I mean, it is kind of the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And I get that. It's like she was my grandma. These were songs that she really liked. Like I'm just showing, a solidarity with the family.
Right.
And ultimately, that's why I said,
yeah,
I will sing.
Like, it was your way of participating in your grandmother's memorial.
But at the same time, I feel like there could have been another way I could have participated. This was just what she wanted because she knew that I'm struggling with it.
She was trying to help you come back.
Yeah. And that really was the reason why I said I need to think about it. Because I needed to process, like, what if I do this, what are my parents going to think about me doing that? Are they going to have like this surge of hope, like she's singing about an eternal family, she's singing about our Heavenly Father creating the world, like maybe that means she does believe some of it, or that was the biggest reason why I said I need to think about it.
Right. And Missi, what was your reaction?
I didn't have a problem singing that, because to me it was, I will do that for my mom, absolutely. Like for me it was, this is a way for my mom to be at peace, and this is a way.
No,
I said
immediately changed.
No, I said, I don't know if I want to sing. And to me, it was not. I never even gave a thought to the fact that the words. It was just singing in public, and I told my mom that, and she knew that, and she actually said, okay, well, I'll try to get this person to be, the chorister, if that'll make you feel better. And I was like, yeah, absolutely, I will do it. try to get as many grandkids there as possible, like just to cover me up. But I will definitely stand up there at the very least. Like I will stand up there.
So it wasn't really an issue.
So it was not an issue for me because I mean they I feel like they kind of know where I am, and I try not to fake it all where I'm at. And I know that Corinne doesn't either. So I mean, if they want to think, oh, maybe Missy's gonna come back, like, I mean, that's just gonna be their heartbreak in the end. That wasn't even something that crossed my mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I know they've already set themselves up for that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm convinced. I mean, I'm sure they even think that you eventually will come around because they blame a certain person.
They do,
for the way you are right now.
Yeah, they blame the girl.
I'm pretty sure that they blame Matt for me leaving as well. And like while he had a big
to be fair,
I
am a pretty bad influence on people.
To be fair, it is Matt's fault. It's
well, I mean, he had a
100%.
big part to play in it, but ultimately it's still my decision,
Right.
and I resisted it for a really long time.
Exactly. I mean, I remember me and you having conversations about how frustrated we were with the church. This wasn't. I don't think it was necessarily a surprise to either of us when we finally left.
Yeah.
You know, we just. I think that for me, I just needed that positive influence in my life, which was, you know, this girl entering my life and me finding other ways to make myself happy outside of the church. And I think that that's the same for you. Like, okay, Matt provided you a way to be happy outside of the church.
Yeah, he was a safe person. It was someone that I could get support from. Had similar experiences. Like,
if I believe that I firmly believe that I would have fallen away eventually, and it would have been a much hairier, gnarly experience. Not one like filled with joy and kind of an easier transition on everyone involved, really. And I think that they don't realize that. They just like to pin it on one person.
It has to be someone's fault, and they don't want it to be ours. Because then they think it's theirs.
Yeah. Which is
what they're taught.
Yeah.
Which is,
And I know Mom already thinks that it's her fault, but it would be worse if she didn't have someone else to blame.
Yeah, and I know that's something that me and Corinne even talked about with you in the car, is how the hardest part for me about this whole thing is that I'm very happy, and I know, like, sitting there in that church at my grandma's funeral, listening to this bishop say how we were going to be an eternal family because we were living the principles of the gospel. Well, this bishop has no idea really what this family is made of. You know, because over half of us are not active, don't even declare ourselves Mormon. I mean, and he's sitting there saying, oh yeah, because you are all these great Mormons, you're going to be an eternal family. Yeah. And I even saw Mom and Dad look at each other at one point, and you know, wondering. Dad gave Mom a little squeeze, like, you know, it's all going to be okay. And it made me so angry. Yeah, it made me so angry that this bishop was basically saying it's because you're this righteous Mormon family when we're not, that we're going to end up together forever. And I know that makes me so sad that eats away at my parents, that they can't be happy at the same time that I'm happy. It's one of us is going to be sacrificing our happiness. Yeah. And I always just kind of hope that eventually down the line we can both be happy together. But right now it's not like that.
Do you think that there's room in Mormon doctrine for that to be the case?
I think that there is the Mormon doctrine actually right now. It states that. I mean, they say you are going to be happy no matter where you end up in the 3 levels of heaven. You will be happy, and you will be able to see people in the lower levels. You know, you can travel down, you can't travel up. Fine with me. Okay, so let's say that this, you know, that Mormonism is correct, and we do all go to this awesome heaven. The Mormons teach me that I'm going to be happy there, and that my parents are still going to be able to come down and see me. What's the issue? You know, it blows my mind that it makes my parents so sad that I'm so happy here, and they don't think that it's going to be eternal in the long run. Yeah. Because I think that the Mormon doctrine even teaches that to them now.
They just can't see it.
They just don't see it, And once again, it's like this cherry picking that the Mormons do. Like, no, you need to be an active recommend holder to be an eternal family. Oh, but don't worry. You'll still see them. But you need to be, like, it oh my gosh, it's ridiculous. It's mind-boggling. Right.
So you mentioned the bishop, and he had an interesting talk. He talked about one of the stories in the Book of Mormon, Alma chapter 40. He quoted, I forget exactly who it was, but they were talking about eternal families and what happens after you die. He obviously talked about how your family's going to be eternal because you are all such great Mormons. And
because they were married in a traditional marriage.
right, in a traditional
Which is
marriage
what
in a
you brought
temple.
up
Which
in
is
the
exactly
Family
what he said.
Proclamation.
Yeah. He brought up the family proclamation, which he didn't say explicitly in his quotation, but if anybody's familiar with the family proclamation, it's very anti-gay marriage.
He actually did
He
say at
did.
one point.
Did he?
He did say a
What-
marriage between a man and a woman.
Okay, yes.
He did say that, yeah.
So it's all traditional family. It's very divisive for anybody that has a gay member in their family, which your family does.
Yeah.
And again, as you mentioned, he just didn't know that this stuff was an issue in your family.
Yeah.
Which I would imagine would be kind of frustrating for you guys, because here is this strange bishop talking about your family.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
He
frustrating.
doesn't even know your grandmother,
Yeah.
Right.
or at least not when she was well.
I don't think he'd ever met her.
Because he was from Heber.
Yeah.
And she was in South Jordan.
He never met her.
So he was like your grandpa's bishop, and so he knew
So
your grandpa well.
everything he knew about our family was word of mouth
Mhm.
from my grandpa. And grandpa is not an open person. He's a very private person.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so there's no way he's going to talk about issues with grandchildren or issues even with his own kids.
Yeah.
And there are those.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Another thing that he said was that losing hope or losing your testimony in the Mormon Church is the same thing as losing all hope. Did you catch that one, Missi?
I kind of shut down after the
Oh, did ya?
proclamation. I was just
Yeah.
kind of done.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That was one that stood out to me.
Yeah.
okay.
Me too.
And then he gave his reasons for believing in Jesus. Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
He said, we know that Jesus is the Savior. You can know for a fact that Jesus is the Savior because we can know for a fact that Joseph Smith was a true prophet.
Oh yes, I do remember
He
that.
did say I. He didn't say we.
Okay, but
That
the
was how
implication
he knew.
is that this will work for you as well. That's
Yeah,
what Mormons do.
I did get that impression as well. I remember because I looked back at you guys and we all
Because I
snickered.
said
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, it was that was
It's
kind of
like,
funny.
there it is.
Yep.
It's that circle.
Yeah. Anything else to say about his talk?
No, it was just a mini sacrament meeting, and I wasn't prepared for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so we talked about the musical number with the grandkids. There was another musical number from, I assume, somebody in your grandpa's ward, a lady saying, I believe in Christ.
No, how great thou art.
Or how great thou art. Yeah. Which is,
I actually really liked that arrangement.
yeah.
I was kind of surprised.
Which is, all about how Jesus is the Savior. Jesus is so awesome, and he does all these things. And then there was the eulogy from your uncle, Jeff, who I was under the impression was less active.
Yes.
I am still under the impression that he is less active. I know his son goes to church regularly. He posts about singles activities all the time, but Jeff doesn't. And his wife right now isn't active.
She's not a member
she's
at
not
all.
even a member.
She's not
That's
a
what I
member
meant.
now.
The last two weren't active.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, but even his eulogy, his eulogy was all about eternal families. It was about seeing your grandmother again. Your grandmother's here in spirit.
It was less than the talk, though, from the bishop. Like,
Yeah.
I could handle Jeff's, because I could think of it more of like a spiritual
Secular,
sense.
yeah.
And it was not entirely secular, but it wasn't LDS eternal family in
Okay.
my mind.
That's a better way to put
Okay.
it.
It kind of reminded me of that book that we talked about. What's her face? Sylvia Brown. How, like, she was welcomed with open arms by her mom and her sister that had passed on before her. That's kind of what I was picturing. Like, it's more of an inclusive viewpoint. Like, people that if they weren't LDS but were religious, they could have bought into the same thing. Like, I was a lot more okay with his eulogy. Since it wasn't so in your face.
Right. And then he gave the dedication on the grave, which is a Mormon ritual where they basically just say a prayer over the gravesite so that it can be ready for the resurrection and that kind of thing.
I did not.
That was surprising to us because it's a dedication and you're supposed to have the Melchizedek priesthood, right?
Right, which is the higher priesthood.
The higher priesthood.
Yeah.
I was surprised that it wasn't like our dad.
Yeah.
Because he's in the High Council, he's a very active person. It's the only bishop that our family has had. Like, I was surprised that Jeff gave it.
I was shocked too, because he even said, by the power of the Melchizedek priesthood, and
Right.
I just kind of was like, wait a minute.
Like this
I
is
thought,
an official ritual.
yeah,
An ordination
it's
kind
kinda-
of thing. Dedication, yeah.
Yeah.
Before the memorial service took place, there was a viewing, and everybody that wanted to could go see the body. And when we went in there were lots of people in there just kind of mingling. And your brother Daniel just kind of looked at me and just like, this is just kind of interesting, a little weird, that kind of thing. And I said something like, yeah, it's just a bunch of people mingling with a dead body in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the overall feeling in the room was just, people kind of having a reunion, getting to see people that they hadn't seen forever. People introducing new additions to the family. Like I met tons of new people that day.
Yeah,
So did we.
we
didn't
did
know
too.
half the people there either.
Yeah.
That was pretty.
But one of the things that a lot of people comment on with Mormons at funerals is that they don't grieve in the same way that a lot of other people do. You go to like a Protestant or a Catholic funeral, and you have just people just bawling, like people just devastated that this person is gone now.
Right.
Even though they still have that general belief that they could see them in the afterlife as well.
Yeah.
But Mormons, like in that room, people were joking. There were people
It was
laughing.
loud.
Yeah.
It was loud, kind of boisterous a little bit. You and I were joking around with your little brother Christopher a lot. And,
Yeah, in line to go say goodbye. That was really funny.
It's a coping
Yeah,
mechanism.
it was completely appropriate. That's just our family, but
But even at in the memorial service, during the eulogy, during the songs, at the dedication, like your grandpa only got teary-eyed once that I saw, and a couple of your aunts, I think, got a little teary-eyed, but nobody, I didn't see anybody just downright sob or break down or just show true sadness, which makes me wonder, like I don't know, like, is that a different kind of grief, a different kind of grieving process?
I just think growing up in the church, like, you just learn to suppress a lot of things. Like, talking about a problem that you may have isn't, like, necessarily encouraged. At least to me.
It was
like, I don't feel like I process my emotions properly because I was terrified of like coming clean about something.
I feel like that was something that was more in our family.
Yeah,
to be honest.
Yeah, I think that is something.
Not
that's
putting
more
blame
common
on
in
our parents, but I feel like they raised us to be stoic and like you will deal with your emotions. You have
I don't
have
even
complete
think that
control.
was necessarily their fault. I think it's the way they were.
Yeah, that too.
Just kind of.
It's kind of just a family.
Yeah, it's just the family dynamic. But I do think that's part of it. Like I think a lot of people just kind of suppress anything that's associated with a negative emotion. Like sadness is a negative emotion. It doesn't make you feel good. The church is all about feeling good. And like if you're sad that this person has died, you don't really believe that this person that you're going to see this person again.
It's like a show of weak faith kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, actually,
and I think you and I talked about that a few days ago. It's like, yeah, if you break down and cry, it's like you're showing that you don't actually believe that you're going to see this person again.
Yeah.
Or that this person lived a good enough life for you to see that person again.
Yeah. One of you is not going to make it.
Right.
like
I think a lot of the reason like why Mom cried a lot was because she was just so relieved that she didn't have to deal with it anymore. Because she was like one of the biggest players in that whole thing.
Oh, she was so stressed out because she had to,
right.
in addition to grieving the death of her mother,
she
had to play hostess.
She had to
coordinate everything.
Yeah.
I mean, even before that, like she was
incredible.
the one that took care of Grandma. Like, Grandpa just couldn't. It wasn't that he didn't necessarily want to. It's just he couldn't.
Yeah.
He himself has lots of health problems. So it's like, yeah.
So
I think that's the biggest
reason
why she was, like, upset. She wasn't really upset. She was just,
it
is over. This huge weight that's been pressing on me for, like, 15 years is finally gone. And it's like...
I think for her, it was almost like she could finally process 17 years of grief. I mean, she had honestly been so stoic and really just strong throughout that entire 17-year period. I never saw my mom. I think that I saw Mom get upset once or twice with Grandma. Yeah. And that was really it, considering all the hours that she put into it. And I really think that it was like a culmination of grief. Yeah. I mean, it was not a...
Yeah, it was...
Yeah. It was not an easy trial for my mom to deal with, and I really think
and
that
it wasn't
for
a
her,
trial that she needed to go through.
right.
It's like, out of all of her sisters, do you really think mom should have been the one to have to deal with that? She's not the one that needed to learn anything about that, you know?
I know. That's
The
very
youngest,
true.
It should have been the youngest daughter.
I think about that all the time. Like, why was this? I mean, it definitely says a lot about our parents. I think how lucky we are to have two really great parents. That our grandparents chose to move to Utah out of everywhere else. They knew this daughter and this son-in-law is going to take care of us. Like they knew.
Yeah.
They're the most consistent, reliable, responsible ones. Yeah,
absolutely.
I've had that same thought too, through the whole thing. It's like Jeff might be the favorite child, but our mom is the only reliable one.
Yeah. You know, and you know, one of our aunts worked for the airlines, and she would fly out all the time and always take care. Like, there were other. She definitely did her part. I feel like as much as she could, but so many. That was the first time that they had seen Grandma in so many years, like her own children.
Yeah, like
had
Rebecca.
not seen her.
I don't think Rebecca has seen her almost since she's been diagnosed. Like she hasn't been to any of the family reunions we've tried to have.
Exactly. So
she never came down and visited.
When all these people are crying over her body, I don't know. It kind of made me angry. In a lot of respects, because
especially
it's like you didn't
Rebecca
know this woman.
Jeff.
Yeah, you didn't
like
know.
Jeff is the favorite, but he did nothing. He never did anything, and I get like financial things, but like put forth more of an effort, you know. It's like when he came down for Grandpa.
He did, yeah. Anyway, that's different subject. I have other things to rant about with that, but anyway. The moral of the story is they definitely. I think that a lot of it was also Jeff is the Melchizedek priesthood holder of these siblings. You know, he's supposed to be this kind of one of the patriarchs of the family. So they gave a lot of responsibility to him throughout the funeral, even though a huge part of Grandma's life was her daughter, was our mom. That was absolutely the biggest portion of her life, and she didn't play a part in the funeral at all. And that honestly made me frustrated because that was never recognized.
It's like
that's true.
But that it's not even an option for
her. It's like what you mentioned at the beginning with not being allowed to make the fire at girls' camp. Yeah. You have to have the men do it.
Exactly.
Like the women aren't supposed to participate in this particular thing. Like it's for the men to do.
Exactly. And I just felt like that was pretty unfair. But
So. So one of the ideas that I came up with as an alternative to this kind of service was to do a funeral memorial / mixer.
Sounds great.
So the idea being that rather than having like a formal eulogy or people getting up and like, you know, giving talks about whatever they believe happens in the afterlife, instead people come to like an open setting, have like appetizers and drinks and that kind of stuff, and they just kind of mingle and share stories about the person that they're there to memorialize. You know.
See, this is why my remains are going to you.
Yeah. But that just reminded me, like when you had that idea, it sounded really familiar to me, and I just realized why.
Is that a thing?
It's okay. So in the book that I read called Scarlet, it's a sequel to Gone with the Wind.
Okay.
Different author, but she ends up going to Ireland because her father's side of the family is Irish, and so she wants to go back to her roots or whatever, and so she spends a lot of time there. And her grandmother, that she's named after, dies while she's over there.
Okay.
And she's been raised obviously in the South, and so she's supposed to like mourn and stuff and be super broken up about it. But the family doesn't do that. That's not how they do it, I guess, in Ireland. It's a joyful thing. She's lived a full life. She's finally passed on, and so they have like a huge party. And Scarlett throughout the entire thing is like really confused by it because everyone's like laughing, they're exchanging stories. They seriously have like this huge party for her. Right. And yeah, that's why it sounded familiar, because that's exactly what you're suggesting. They didn't have like a huge service.
And here I thought I was being original.
Yeah. But I still like it. I think it's a great idea. I mean, it seems a lot more closer to the whole celebration of life than the
because for me, like I understand that religious people want to be consoled by their religious beliefs, that they want to believe that they're going to see the person after they die, be reunited and all that kind of stuff. But for me, like, it should be about the person. It should be about their life. It should be about the positive things that they did, the good relationships and friendships that they had, all that kind of stuff. Like, so to me, that's what a memorial should be. I thought it was funny, like the first thing that Missy said when we got into the car was, this is why you guys are going to be in charge of my funeral.
Yeah. Yeah, I did. I said that as soon as we got in the car from the funeral.
Right. One thing that I thought was interesting too was that her sister Lola had nothing to do with the funeral.
That was
like she didn't get up and like give us like tell any stories about growing up with her.
Mm-hmm.
Like she was just there.
That was tough, and I think that was really tough on Lola too.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Like.
And that's unfortunate because they spent this whole time talking about stuff that they talk about at every single church function, rather than talking about the person.
The person, yeah.
And that's
and,
sad.
like, people's interactions with her.
Mm-hmm.
Like the closest we got was Jeff's eulogy, and it was only a couple of stories that most people there had heard before.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
really tough.
So so let's talk about what you guys would want to have at your own funerals.
I honestly,
or how would you do
it
it
differently?
differently?
To be at a church.
Yeah, that's my big thing. Like, I would not want it to be
cremated.
did not want it to be at a church. Cremation would be great. And honestly, I have most of my outstanding, really close friends that have made an impact on my life are not Mormon at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be like so sad if they did not get to memorialize me the way that they wanted to, which is much more similar to what you brought up. Have an actual memorial. I can just imagine if I died and my funeral was at like some Mormon funeral, they would just, oh my goodness, they would not be happy with that at all.
No,
I know they would be miserable.
It's
wouldn't
unsatisfying.
Be able to participate.
Yeah.
They would be able to say anything. Like they just go in and touch your body.
Yeah.
And then you have to go listen to someone talk to you.
That's
About
oh wait,
how
are we
we need to
supposed
be
to now
Mormon.
convert to Mormonism
Yeah,
now? Because
it really is just a church
it's
service.
just crazy.
Yeah.
So we don't want that.
Basically,
Cremation
just not that.
preferably, and then do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Cremation is often frowned upon in Mormonism because of the whole resurrection thing.
Right.
And they have this weird idea that, if you get cremated, it's somehow going to make you not resurrect as quickly.
Yeah.
Like if you get buried, then you'll be at the forefront of the resurrection.
Because your body's pretty much all intact already.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh my
it's
gosh.
just a little gooey.
Yeah, that's super weird.
Yeah. It's like if God was smart enough to be able to create us out of nothing, don't you think he'd be able to recreate us out of nothing?
Pretty 100% positive.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, he made Adam out of dirt.
Exactly. And made out of his rib.
Right.
So come on. Like,
Pretty
how
sure you
hard
can
is
make
it
me
to-
out of my own ashes.
Right.
you can do that. You can
Even
do
if
it,
they
God.
were in a
I
lake.
believe. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, even if you scatter them to the wind, I think an all-powerful being should be able to just snap his fingers, and everyone
Use that
that ever
all-powerfulness.
lived should be back.
That's the other thing that blows my mind about religion is they always say, "Oh, this is an all-powerful being," but apparently he's got a lot of rules that he's got to live by too.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense to me. Why? And anyway.
That's why Mr. Deity is funny.
Have you ever seen Mr. Deity?
No.
You should look up
maybe
Mr.
we should
Deity.
watch some after we finish this.
Okay,
up.
yeah.
Everybody needs to be familiar with Mr. Deity.
Okay.
Go look it up on
funny.
YouTube.
Mr. Deity.
Okay, so final thoughts on funerals or any other things we've talked about?
No. That's good.
So we've covered a lot of subjects today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Impressive.
Well, thank you, Missy, for joining us.
No problem.
That is our show.
Oh, thanks for listening.
There we go.
I never remembered that I actually say something.
If you would like to get a hold of us, you can do so by emailing us at skepticsquaredpodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the show's blog at www.skepticsquaredpodcast.blogspot.com. And as always, you can review us or rate us on iTunes. And we will see you next time on the Skeptic Squared podcast. And exit with playful banter.
Nice.
All right, cool.
What I was going to rant about, like